How you doing? This is Potter with Four Court South Florida Softball Podcast, and we're here with the one and only Ralph Calderon and Liz. First, Ralph, I'd like to say, I love what you've done with your hair.
Thank you.
I know you did that for me.
Yeah,
I heard.
exactly.
So it looks great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first, I'm going to ask you, what would you like for us to provide for our viewers, educationally, on basically with softball, with U-Trip, and basically how things go? What type of information?
Well, the one thing that I'll say, just information as far as U-Trip is concerned. Coming from another association 6 years ago versus where I'm at now, and now how I see upper management put back into the program, not just into their pockets.
Okay.
You hear a lot about the director this, the director that, but our online system, the fact that we have people from all over the country that we have to just send our information to for reclassification. We have people looking over us. It's not just one person who says, okay, I'm gonna make a decision, and it's gonna be the same way here and that's it. No, whatever we decide here has to be approved by somebody above us, and is uniformly done throughout the whole.
Little checks and balances type of thing.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's big, because a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of other sanctions that do just, a lot of it's about the money. And that, I think, is a lot of the problems that some of these players and some of the viewers are having, is because they're supposed to play this and all the reclassification.
But what I will say about it being about the money, to make money, you gotta invest money, and that's the one thing that U-Trip does. They invest.
That's awesome.
What other association has a complex as beautiful as this?
No, this
that has
awesome.
its own name. We don't rent this place out. This is ours, and it takes an investment from the association. Okay, to just say whatever money is being spent to pay this place off could be going into somebody's pocket.
Yeah.
Because it's still, regardless of this complex or not, it's still the number one association.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this complex is amazing. We always look forward to coming here and playing, co-ed, men's, and even women's. I mean, my wife hasn't gotten to the women's yet, but hopefully soon, But we love this place. It's a different game here. It's a different game. Everything's a true hop, and it's just a beautiful complex. And hopefully it doesn't rain this time, huh?
Well, even if it rains, the turf is a game changer.
Yep.
There's plenty of tournaments that we've gone through here that on clay we just couldn't. We would have to cancel it.
Yep.
And when you cancel tournament in an area where you have people driving so many hours away, you're talking about investment in hotels and stuff like that. We're guaranteeing that, hey, unless it's something Mother Nature that we can't control, where it's just not safe to play, or lightning, we're gonna play.
Yeah,
we're gonna
awesome.
get it in. We're gonna get it done. And how many times haven't I left here at 2-3 o'clock in the morning? The major this year had a game because there was a hurricane nearby. So they the last championship game, I think, was started at 2 o'clock in the morning. That was just because they wanted to make sure we got it done and got people on a plane so that they can go back home and to their loved ones and be safe. So that's also something that no other
That's awesome.
association can offer. They're letting us stay here basically till we get it done.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
So that means you guys end up getting what you paid for.
Yeah.
You paid for a tournament, the tournament got it.
Yep, that's big, man. Especially when you're having teams come from all over the place and they're able to come here and finish a tournament, and with rain, lightning, whatever delay, is able to finish. Even though, I know there's a couple of turns where you went till 4 o'clock in the morning and then you had to start back up at 8 or 9. So which is awesome.
But it could have been. You got done at 4 and sent everybody home.
Yeah.
No, we finished it.
Yeah, you finished it, definitely.
And that's the key.
So let's talk about the reclassification. Obviously, the year's about to end, and now teams are starting to get reclassed. Players are starting to get reclassed. And is there any heads up for some teams already that already know that they're going to be reclassed?
Reclassed?
Yeah. No.
No. Bumped? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely teams. If you have a winning percentage of over 600 statewide, you're gonna get bumped. One of the criteria that I've always followed is if you have a 20 team in one division or more, and it's a national tournament, you're gonna get bumped. Just like at Worlds, top 10 gets get bumped. So if you have 200 teams, anyone who's in the 20th place, tied for 20th and up, they're getting bumped.
That's
Top
good.
10.
You know, hopefully,
So.
hopefully these teams get bumped. They stay together, and you know the C and D and all that will start opening up. I know this year was I don't know if it's the first year, but from what I see, there's more D than E in Worlds.
It's actually been a trend for us the last couple of years.
That's awesome.
I remember 6 years ago when we first started, man, especially here in Florida. The one thing people just didn't realize is that there were so many other associations too that come into mind. You know, when I started, ISA ran the state. After that, Freedom ran the state. So what we ended up having is a lot of people who only played U-Trip in the big events. There was really nothing local. So I would say 80 to 90% of the bump ups come from our state events.
Yeah.
Because you really have to be really, really good or lucky to get bumped to play well enough or fall in the right place in the bracket at Worlds to get top 10.
Yeah.
But if you're playing us 2 times a month and you know you're mostly winning these tournaments, then
Yeah,
you're gonna get bumped.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's-
And which it should be, because you know what, if you're on top of the level, if you're playing at that level, you want to play a better competition. You should want to go up and continue to meet better competitions.
Exactly.
You know. So obviously there's a difference between bumping and reclassification, but like you say, so if you could go real quick about the reclassification process, how
Okay.
people are getting dropped, you know.
Okay.
are
And I'll start. I think education as to our system is very important. And what they came up with at the convention this past year, which I thought was great, was the PRV system. And what it best way for me to explain it is the highest you've ever been is what you're gonna be classed now.
Mhm.
Now, in Florida, you have so much roster hopping. You go from one team to the other.
Yeah.
You know, your D team has a core of 7 players, but every weekend you're gonna need to pick up 3
Yeah,
E
2 or 3,
guys.
yeah.
Okay? If you pick up an E guy and you did well, but you removed him from the roster, we can tell. We can say, okay, well, he played here once or
Yeah,
twice,
he's a
so
good
he shouldn't be he shouldn't. I wouldn't call it penalized because promoting a person is not a penalty.
No, exactly.
Only in softball is it considered a
Yeah,
penalty when
exactly.
you promote someone, but he shouldn't be moved up based on what obviously was just helping out that weekend.
Helping out that weekend.
So what I tell people now is January 1st, well, our bump ups will come out in a couple of weeks after the convention. And what I tell people is once they're online, go to USSSA.com, hit player, type in your name, it'll give you your PRV.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, it'll give you your ranking. Now it makes it easier for me to not guess, well, he was
Yeah.
this and he was that. No, this is your
Right
your
there.
letter.
Yeah.
Okay? Now that you know what your letter is, do we agree with it? Do we disagree with it? Okay, now you have between January 1st and the end of March,
To try and figure it out.
right?
Yeah.
To try to get the national committee to change that classification where to put you where you belong, if we feel that's where you belong.
Yeah. And
And this is where I think having Liz is such a huge asset, South Florida, because South Florida is backyard softball heaven. I mean, you can play every weekend in South Florida and never play a U-Trip tournament, and play in great tournaments, because there's so much. So for a person who, if I'm looking at a computer, and he says to me, I haven't played U-Trip in blah, 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 however many years, it's hard for me, I don't know this person. So this is where Liz comes in, she knows all the players down there. She'll be able to tell me who
Yeah.
deserves that ranking and who doesn't. So that's where having a local director helps us in the state and above level so much.
Awesome, and that was the next thing that we were going to touch on is how has Liz been such a how has she done in South Florida, and obviously that's a big part of knowing the players and knowing basically who and face to a name basically, and so that comes to you. So how do you feel with this position? How does that feel being the South Florida director, having that that's responsibility of say, okay, this player's this.
Yeah, I do know a lot of the players, and I know that Ralph doesn't really have a lot of knowledge of the players down there because obviously he's basically up here in the central part of the state. So how do I feel about it? I feel like if I can help someone to be placed where they need to be placed, then I'm gonna help them. And I'm very fair. I get into arguments with my husband all the time. He thinks he shouldn't be a C player or B player.
So you're saying Danny's not fair?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
but I'm 54 years old. It doesn't matter, So I try to be as fair as possible, and I'll always ask opinions of other people, like the same way that USSSA, it's a collaborative effort. When stuff happens, it just doesn't happen on one person's opinion. So a lot of people come to me and they try to see, we can do to reclass that person, but I always tell them, listen, you have to submit your information, you have to talk to Ralph, and then if Ralph needs to ask me, then we'll go from there.
Awesome.
But
Yeah, your husband's been around for a long time.
yeah, he's ancient.
He's a great pitcher, but anyway, so that's perfect. So Ralph, real quick, what's the possibility to have you live on our podcast?
Anytime.
And concerns on
Anytime.
There's a lot of players that have concerns. So
and there's concerns, and I'm pretty sure I know some of the questions and stuff like that, and I'm always willing to answer. The one thing that I'll tell people.
Just want to say hello. How are you? I didn't see you today. How are you? What's going on? How you doing? I'll give you a hug too. I don't know you, but I'll give you a hug.
how you doing?
Good. Bye, guys.
Sue from
I
DOA,
didn't know
everyone.
that was live.
That was pretty funny. But what people need to understand is that a decision that's made in South Florida has to match and be the same that's done in North Florida. Central Florida is a lot easier for me because most of the teams play in my events, and I can put a lot of names, but after that I have to rely on word of people who I trust.
Yeah.
And for many years, a lot of times people don't understand. I've in my time here, Jeff Dees ran some events down there, but I really haven't had a solid director down there. So you'd be surprised how information, who I go to. I have go-to people who I've known over 20 years, and who will tell me, no, he's BSing. He's actually a very good player.
Yeah.
Who have no knowledge, like they don't have a dog in the race, so they'll just give me. And now that's something that you may not want to hear, but I didn't make the decision on my own.
Yeah.
Because I want to be fair to the person. I don't know you. I don't want, and the computer actually does lie sometimes, in the sense of you look at where a person's played, and you can say, wow, he must be a stud. Well,
I mean, you get on a team, and actually I was just talking to a couple players on Toon Squad, and I mean, obviously they're one of the top teams here. They've ran through E this year, and the whole thing that they're talking about is just the family aspect. Yeah, maybe they might not be the greatest player, maybe they might not be the best in their position, but when you have a family around you that is there and knows your flaws, they're going to step up, and you're going to be a better player because of the team that you're on. You're going to move up. And
Toon Squad to me is a perfect example of the process. MAD is to me a team that I consider part of the process. 2-3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, Toon Squad MAD was probably middle of the road E team. Now everyone, you hear the comments of, oh, they should be. Well, yeah, you guys are looking at where they're at now.
Exactly.
But you have to think about the teams that we moved from E to D the last couple of years, so that they moved up in the pecking
It's
order.
their turn.
It's, you know,
It's their turn.
Process.
and that's part of the process.
Yep, and listen, if that process was perfect, then obviously there wouldn't be any. But you know what? It is a process, and it's working to
Mhm.
some extent, which is
Mhm.
awesome. It gives teams like Toon Squad and Mad, and who knows next year, what the next teams are going to step up and be that next
Flamingos
the next
is
team.
another one.
Flamingos.
Flamingos, yeah, exactly. So and it's awesome because even there's some teams back in our backyard that play the little the little tournaments at any hammocks, the little parks. But now we're starting to branch out and play different tournaments, go to Fort Lauderdale, and
Which is
hopefully start
great.
coming here. Which that's what it's about, getting more people involved and just continue to filter these players in. So
I wanted to touch on one thing before I even forget about it, and it goes back towards Liz, and I think it kind of touches on educating the South Florida teams. So one thing that as a state director, my job is to get teams ready for Worlds and to get as many teams eligible to play at Worlds. What we've done in North Florida, who up until this year was a very heavy U trip, we made it so that we had a North Florida State, North Florida NITs. We made it so that the one time you traveled to Worlds, it was for Worlds. So that you didn't have to come to Vieira to play the NITs or stuff, so that the one time, because it's expensive, it's costly, hotels, food, stay. So this year was kind of tough on the South Florida teams that wanted to play Worlds, because they had to come to Vieira 4 times, whereas what we're saying is support the program. And we're gonna make it easier for you to come to Worlds. We're gonna give you tournaments at Mills or whoever will let us down there, so that your national events are local national events. So you'll have to, the one time you'll spend money will be when you come to Vieira in September or October.
which is awesome. And you know what, having that availability down there is
Is the teams like Packing Wood came up here one time, very good team.
Yeah.
I'm sure Liz can reel off teams that don't travel that much, that would love the experience of coming.
Absolutely.
But I can't, they didn't qualify,
Yeah.
so I can't make them world eligible.
Yeah, definitely.
So-
Which is huge, and that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand, the qualifications and how to qualify and stuff, and now having that availability down south at Mills and possibly maybe in Miami, even further down south, maybe in the Keys, who knows, which would be huge.
I think another thing is I always call it getting them in the system. South Florida has tons of players who have no player history.
Right.
We want to get them in the system because we want to make it so once they get in the system, we make teams will travel down because they feel like they can compete.
Yeah.
For years you had so many good players playing down in South Florida. I mean, conference level.
Yeah.
And it's not that they were necessarily cheating. They didn't have the player history to put them where. So if we get everybody where they belong, you get more teams. You're going to get teams that will travel down south and play. They have great venues down there that they can make a weekend of it. But nobody wants to travel to get their asses handed to.
Definitely.
So that's huge.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
And go on.
And I encourage as well, because there's a lot of tournaments going on all throughout the state, and we play all the time in the same parks. We know we play the same teams, we know the same people, and sometimes we come up here to Vieira and we play in a World's tournament, and our first game is against someone that we already know.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest complaints that I hear about, big tournaments up here, is that they come up here and it's like, oh, we're playing the same teams that we're playing down south. If you can manage to drive north, come to Orlando and play in Ralph's tournaments. Go a little further north, go to Ocala, go to Daytona Beach and play in David's tournaments. They're great tournaments. You meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. You play against other teams, and your level of play gets stepped up.
Yeah.
Because now you're not playing in your comfort zone, you're not in your backyard, and you'd be surprised and amazed at how many great people you're gonna meet
Yeah, definitely.
by getting out of that little area that we
Yeah.
call our backyard.
Mhm.
There's so many players in the state, and really, it's a beautiful thing because there are so many really good players, and you have that Southern hospitality because everybody treats you as if they've known you,
Forever.
forever. So there's, because there's that kind of like stigma. We don't want to go to the north because maybe you won't get treated the same way. Get over that because that's not true.
Florida's fun. Yeah, and we were just talking about the all-nighter that you went to last weekend.
Yeah, that was great.
The co-ed, which is awesome. And I mean, that's one thing that we've been saying is co-ed's been going down a little bit, especially down south. And I mean, if we get more girls, find a way to get more girls out there playing, get the co-ed going, and start bringing more co-ed teams up here, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
And with that said, what's your favorite to watch as a director? Do you like watching men's co-ed or women's?
Upper men's.
Upper men's is your favorite?
Upper, C and above. It's
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'll tell you why. You may hear chirping outside of the field,
Mhm.
but when you're in between the line, there's a level of respect at that level because you're playing amongst the best.
Yeah.
The guys who are in league, they're jerks. When they're playing amongst their peers, they're completely different people.
Mm.
So that's what I love. I love how, as I'm an old umpire,
Mhm.
so the higher the level as an umpire, the more you get amped up for it. It's your sport. It's also like, okay, I don't want to stand out, but I also don't want to be pointed out.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that my game as an umpire is good,
Of course.
and the good players actually bring it out in you so
Exactly.
much more.
I mean, good umpires, you are unknown.
Yeah.
Good umpires are unknown. They're
Exactly.
They're not known in the game. Which is that's a big part of it. And you, Liz, what's your favorite?
My favorite division, I would say, is probably men's D.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very competitive. And
Wow. No co-ed, no women's. Woof.
no, I mean, you're asking me what my favorite
Yeah, your
is.
favorite.
I love all of it
Yeah.
because I am that one person that
Yeah.
would rather
But men's D is
be
your-
on the field than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
But men's D, I think, is where it's at.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And favorite league night. Any league nights?
No.
No.
I was, even when I umpired, I was not a very big fan of league nights.
No?
I'll say this though, the league nights where we had in Osceola, where I'm basically from. I mean, you had the conference player, Castillo, and all that. Those were fun.
That's awesome.
And because a couple years ago, people didn't care about playing with them or against them, and sometimes they didn't win every game.
No, I mean we all gotta wake up in the morning. We gotta put our shoes on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, which is awesome, and that the reason why I ask, and I'll ask you also, if we start getting out these different league nights and see, okay, this is where these players are playing, maybe more people might start, going to certain league nights for better competition. You play against better competition, you're only going to get better, And your favorite league night?
I mean, I'm always at Brian Piccolo.
Brian Piccolo?
Yeah.
Any nights?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
I mean, literally, I bought a house like 5 minutes away from the park because I
There you
figured,
go.
my dad's
You're
like,
there,
come live in Miami.
Live
I'm like,
there,
no,
right?
I've got to go live in close to the park because that's where we live. It's our life.
Well, I want to thank you guys. Really appreciate you guys sitting in with me for a couple minutes and talking to me. You'll see we'll post on Facebook and hopefully we'll have you guys on live soon.
Anytime.
We
Thanks.
do.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We do live is usually Mondays. Mondays between 6 and 7 is when we start.
Okay.
We do a live.
Look forward to it.
Yep,
podcast.
absolutely.
All right.
Count me in.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Again, thank you guys for viewing, and we'll see you guys Monday.